From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Well, good morning, folks. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. It's Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. Thank y'all for tuning in this morning. We're live on your favorite social media platforms and video viewing platforms like YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitter, now X, Twitch, Rumble, Facebook, and Instagram, and all these other awesome platforms. Thank y'all for being here with us this morning. It's a busy show today. Yesterday's show obviously really focused on the situation in Israel. We've got a lot to talk about there, but today's show is going to be focused purely for practitioners. Tomorrow, we plan to do a little deep dive on some of the cyber events that are going on in Israel, some of the stuff that's going on there. It's really kind of changing. I don't want to say changing the game, but the hacktivism is making its way there. So we'll talk a little bit about that on tomorrow's show. So with that being said, our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Israel and the over 900 dead, over 2,700 wounded in the attacks by Hamas. Some of the stories that are starting to come through and some of the testimonies from the survivors are heartbreaking. Everyone's seen clips of spokesperson Kirby choking up on the White House grounds yesterday, talking about some of that stuff with Jake Tapper over at CNN. Anderson Cooper choking up after interviewing a survivor and not being able to continue to broadcast. The atrocities are unfathomable. They're not human. These are animals, and they'll be dealt with like animals. And so with that being said, join me for our morning cup of coffee. I've got my double espresso this morning. Cup cheers, y'all. So last week we talked a little bit about Looney Tunables and the Linux flaw. Well, now we're seeing proof of concept exploits for this CVE, which is CV 2023-4911. The proof of concept exploit has already been developed following the disclosure of the critical buffer overflow vulnerability that's widely used in the GNU-C library present in various Linux distributions. Peter Giesler, Will Dorman, a software vulnerability analyst with Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute, and a Dutch cybersecurity student at Eindhoven University of Technology were among those posting POC exploits on GitHub and elsewhere, indicating widespread attacks in the wild could soon follow. The flaw, which was properly disclosed by the Qualys researchers, poses a significant risk of unauthorized data access, system alteration, and potential data theft for systems running Fedora, Ubuntu, Debian, and other major Linux distributions, potentially granting attackers root privilege on countless Linux systems. This does deserve every practitioner's top priority. And look, this is something where if you haven't done any meetings on, you should be calling for meetings today or tomorrow to address patching or mitigating this flaw. As proof of concepts become available, so will attackers start to look for vulnerable Linux servers with these OSs and with these distributions and start to take care of them. So the exponential growth of Linux has made it a bigger target. This is obviously followed by what we originally used to say about Mac OS, right? Or OS. No one targets OS to go after Windows. There's very few. So if you're on OS, you're less likely to be targeted. We know that to be false today with the amount of 0 days we've seen in Apple OS. The same applies for Linux. And now this is significant. Amazon has also announced they're adding MFA requirement for users with higher privileges. So there's that. You want to make sure you get this addressed. And again, patching is another one. Mitigating the systems is also critical. This is a system takeover. So really you want to patch and address it. But if you can't do regular patching, if you can't do regular updating, then you got to have some workarounds. And some of those are really not convenient. So just keep that in mind. The UK cable manufacturing giant Volex is being targeted in a cyber attack that involved unauthorized access to some of the company's IT systems and data. A statement issued yesterday, the power and data transmission product manufacturer said all of its sites remain operational. It doesn't expect any financial impact caused by the incident to be material. However, it did admit that it did lead to some minimal disruption to global production levels. On becoming aware, the group enacted its established IT security protocols and took immediate steps to stop the unauthorized access to its systems and data. Third-party consultants are on staff here, and so apparently, this wasn't too bad from a impact perspective, but nonetheless significant because it impacts the supply chain, and that's significant there as well. For those using Citrix NetScaler, the Citrix NetScaler login pages are now being used to steal credentials as hackers use those to exploit a recent CVE 2023-3519er. The Flaw is a critical unauthenticated remote code execution bug, which was discovered as a 0-day in July of this year. It impacts NetScaler ADC and NetScaler Gateway. You can go back and see those episodes in July. By early August, the Flaw had been leveraged to backdoor at least 640 Citrix servers, and the figure reached 2,000 by mid-August. X-Force first discovered a NetScaler campaign while investigating a case where a client experienced slow authentication on their NetScaler device. The responders found that the attackers breached using CVE 2023-3519 to inject a malicious credentials stealing JavaScript into the NetScaler's device index.html login page. And then that web shell did its own work for them. So the threat actor registered several domains. For this, the X-Force identified almost 600 unique IP addresses for NetScaler devices whose login pages had been modified to facilitate credential stealing operations. Many of the victims were located in the US and Europe, although you do see some in China, Japan, the Philippines, Malaysia, the UAE, Saudi, and South Africa and Australia, obviously. So there's that to be mindful of. And in a new patch now, including D-Link and Zixel gear remain vulnerable to takeover despite availability of patches for several bugs being exploited by the IZ1H9 campaign. These guys are emerging vulnerabilities in a new campaign called IZ1H9. It's ramped up its malware development to target a range of unpatched routers and IoT devices and add them to a widening botnet used to launch targeted DOS cyber attacks. Researchers from the FortiGuard Labs flagged the campaign, which was recently updated with 13 new payloads leveraging known vulnerabilities in D-Link devices, Netis wireless routers, Sun Hilo, Sureline, and Gudabook IP cameras and Yelink devices management, Sixel devices, TP-Link Archer, Cornix Jetwave, and Toto-Link routers are all impacted. It's evident that the peak exploitation occurred on September 6th, but Fortinet is recommending that people get those patched. A recent Magecart web skimming campaign is using 3 concealment techniques, including hiding malicious code in the targeted website's 404 error page, according to Akamai researchers. Since at least 2015, we've talked about this for as long as I've had this podcast. Literally, Magecart was like top news in 2018 when the show really started to kind of gain traction. And so over the past several weeks, Akamai reports that one of the Magecart groups has been operating a sophisticated and covert campaign. They're targeting numerous websites, including those of large organizations in the food and retail sector, using various techniques to prevent detection, including hiding code in the default 404 error pages. This relies on a malformed HTML image tag with an empty SRC attribute to bypass the network scanners and trigger the code's execution within the context of the page. The second campaign uses a code snippet closely resembling the metapixel code to make it appear legitimate. The code would then fetch the PNG image from a remote location, and which then is extracted and executes a loader like the one present. And the third variation is masquerades as a metapixel code, but which said to fetch a request for a relative path that did not exist, leading to the 404 error. So that campaign is live. A libcue library impacting GNOME Linux system that could be exploited to achieve RCE on affected host. The CVE is 2023-43641, a CVSS score of 8.8. The issue is described as a case of memory corruption in libcue, a library designed for parsing QSheet files that impacts versions 2.2.1. libcue is incorporated in Tracker Miners, a search engine tool that's included by default in the GNOME and indexes for files in the system for easy access. So there's that as well. ALPHV, the guys behind the MGM ransomware attack, are now saying they've launched an attack on the Florida Circuit Court. The Florida Circuit Court, which is part of the first judicial system, is apparently an impact with details. Affecting CVs, social security numbers of employees, including judges. ALPHV claims to possess a comprehensive network of the map systems and other stuff as well. The gang is threatening to leak some of that data online. So these guys are out doing their own thing here. So the breach happened last week on October 2nd. And the circuit is prioritizing essential court proceedings, and it will cancel and reschedule others for related and pause related operations for several days beginning of last week. So these guys are really trying to piss some people off, and they might successfully do so here. The third Flagstar Bank data breach since 2021 and now affects 800,000 customers. Flagstar, which is now owned by the New York Community Bank, is a Michigan-based financial services provider that before its acquisition last year was one of the largest banks in the U.S., having assets over $31 billion. It's warning that now 800,000 U.S. customers had their PII stolen by cyber criminals due to the breach. The data breach notification explains that Flagstar was indirectly impacted by Fiserv, a vendor it uses for payment processing and mobile banking services. Fiserv was breached in a widespread transfer data theft attack, and so the attackers exploited that zero-day vulnerability. It's their third breach in 2 years. They were hacked by the Acelion file transfers that went from Acelion to MoveIt, got breached there, and so they're dealing with that as well. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow with a whole lot more. Thank you all for tuning in this morning. Please make sure to share, like, subscribe, and follow us on your favorite podcast listening platform. Till then, have a great rest of your day, and most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.